All right. Well, I guess you could first just introduce yourself, your name, your degree, and your year of study.
Yep, so my name is Cady Brown. I am studying my Bachelor of Political, Economical and Social Sciences, and I'm in my third year.
Awesome. And what's your campaign colour and slogan?
I'm running on a light blue, and my slogan is Cady Can.
Awesome. All right. And what has been your favourite USU production?
I really get excited every year for Welcome Week.
Oh, okay.
I think it's such a good way to encourage people to get involved in the university, and I just find it a really fun environment. I look forward to it every year.
Sure. I think with production, we're looking for like a review or a show.
Right.
Or something
Yeah.
like that. Not a
Okay, so like a
program.
program.
Yeah.
Not a program.
I really the production. So are you specifically looking for like a review or something?
Yeah, or
like
a
that?
recent show you've seen
Or a recent
produced
show.
by SUDS or a club or society.
I haven't seen anything most recently to pick a favourite, but I guess it's interrelated with the USU. There is the Palladium Performing Arts program,
Okay.
and that's run through the colleges, and it's a competition. Yes, it's a showcase of all the best talents within the collegial system. So yeah, I'd probably say the Palladium program and the competitions that are involved in that. So that's including like dance, drama, music,
Cool.
visual arts.
That was just
kind
an
of stuff.
icebreaker question.
Yeah, no.
It's all right. It's all right. Sorry
It's
to
all
hear.
good. I was
No,
just
no,
like,
that's all right. That's all
Yeah,
right. Play,
no
yeah,
worries,
yeah.
yeah.
I guess just the next question is, are you a member of any political party? Or?
So I'm running as an independent in this election. I like to keep my work life and my university life very separate. So for this purpose and for this election, I am running as a complete independent, not bound to any faction.
But I guess outside of your university,
Yeah.
are you a member of any political party?
It would be incorrect for me to come out and lie and say that I'm not. I am a member of the Liberal Party.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long have you been a member of the Liberal Party?
I've only been an active member for the last year.
Yeah. Okay. I guess in terms of student politics, have you previously campaigned for any other candidates or have been nominated in any campus election?
So I was really involved in Lachlan Finch's election last year. I campaigned very hard for him. I also was very involved campaigning-wise in Shake Up last year, and also the colleges for SRC ticket that
Yeah.
ran last year. Yeah.
Okay. And are you a member? Are you a member of any political faction on campus, or are you aligned
No.
with any? Okay.
No, so every kind of stu poll kind of experience that I have has been affiliated with an independent campaign.
Okay. So, who is your campaign manager, and do they also belong to the sort of same political, faction on campus or political party?
Yep, so my campaign manager is Nick Rigby, and he also identifies as a moderate Liberal outside of campus, but we've only worked on independent campaigns together throughout our university stu poll experience.
And I imagine for this campaign he's also an independent.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes, no, absolutely.
All right. So, is there I know? So you're saying that you like to keep things separate.
Yeah.
But is there a particular other reason why you decided to run as an independent this election?
I feel like I'm very strong about this, and this is something that I've been very vocal about since I've started at university and started getting involved in like university organs and the way that they operate. I feel like the USU board should not be politicised. I feel like if you are bound to a political faction and a political ideology within a university organ that's meant to represent the best interests not only of the union board but of the students, that creates a lot of tensions and can really bound your decisions as a board director. And that's why as a board director I want to keep completely independent, because I want my best interest to be within the union and most likely and importantly with the students.
Okay. But I guess, do you also think that running as an independent will sort of increase your chances of winning or like connecting with students?
I am not running as an independent to kind of reduce the stigma of, being politically bound. I am completely running as an independent, so I can make the best, so my policies are shaped and my decisions are shaped around the best interest of every single student
Yeah.
on campus and for the union.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people who are politically aligned outside of university have successfully won board positions in the past, running as independents. But do you think students, who say they're independent at uni, but who are different outside of uni, do you think students will sort of see through those claims of independence? And do you think, perhaps maybe some people see it as opportunistic or misleading?
I have shaped my policies to be things that I've identified that are wrong with the uni. They're not shaped by any political ideology or political thought. These are just things that I thought would resonate with the students the most, because I feel like they are the current fallacies within the university and the student experience, and I would rather resonate with the students through those policies than to shape my political experience to affiliate with my policies to affiliate with a political party. I hope that students see me as a candidate and see how honest I am when I say that I do not want this and I don't like this student union to be politicised. I don't think that's really effective, and I've been very vocal about that since the beginning of this, and it's something that I've carried through all the way because I genuinely believe it, and that's why I keep my work and professional life very separate from my university experience, because sometimes if you're bound to a political faction and bound to, so consumed in your ideologies based on that and based on your politics, then you are bound to maybe not make decisions that are beneficial for students, and I think that's really wrong.
Yeah.
Sure. Just as a quick sort of follow-up to that question, you mentioned that you don't want to see a politicised union just then. Would you then make a commitment to students that if elected you would sever your roots with the Liberal Party? Would you discontinue your membership with them? Would you take any active steps to present yourself as someone who's completely non-political, or do you just sort of trust students to accept that you're somehow able to compartmentalise your political convictions off campus with your political independence claim on campus?
Right. So I can definitely see where you're coming from. I just hope that, it's that students will trust me as a candidate, and I think my campaign will really showcase that I am here for the students and for the students only, and for the union and for the union only. I wouldn't sever my ties with the Liberal Party. I am vocally very moderate in the Liberal Party, very moderate in the Liberal Party. I don't feel like, I've had this conversation with a few people, and it's very easy to, with the current state of the Liberal Party, to sever your ties because you disagree with what's currently going on, but I'll rather stay in trying to change the way the Liberal Party is at the moment. I feel like that's more effective. Like I said, I am very adamant about keeping my professional life and my student experience different, and that's why I've only ran with independent candidates and only independent campaigns, to make sure that that is separate. I would be lying to sit here and say that I'm not a Liberal, and I would feel like I'm lying to the student community. But yet again, for the people that know me well enough, and hopefully I can come across to the student community, that for when I enter the gates of this university, I hope as a board director to make make my decisions in the best interests of the union and for the students, and maximise the student experience.
You mentioned that when you sort of just come into campus, you effectively lose your political convictions off campus. Despite that, you have endorsed before candidates who are very close to the Liberal Party. You've campaigned for Lachlan Finch, a previous member of the Mosman Young Libs. Your ticket, Colleges for SRC, endorsed the son of a former federal MP, Peter Hendy's son. Given all of these connections between Liberals on campus who do identify as independents, do you think there is this sort of fundamental issue with candidates who claim independence despite having political membership? Or do you think that's something that any candidate should have sort of at their disposal, that a Labor candidate can sort of claim independence or a Greens candidate can claim independence, and that's all fine, and students don't mind that as long as the candidates claim that they're independent?
Yeah. So my affiliations with Lachlan Finch's campaign, he ran on very independent policies and he advocated as a very independent candidate, and that really inspired me in the way that I conduct myself around the university. And in terms of the Colleges for SRC ticket, those people that were on that ticket come from very divergent political views. They were very divergent ticket members, and we created that ticket purely for the interest of the colleges rather than the interest of a predominant political party. The endorsing of Pat Hendy was only purely because he was a former college student at one of the colleges that was represented, rather than his backgrounds in the Liberal Party.
Sure.
I would not have endorsed on that ticket a candidate for the Senate that was a Liberal Party member but not a college student. The reason why we endorsed Pat Hendy was because he was a former college student and was advocating for the colleges, and that was the most important to the ticket.
Sure. Let's talk about some more fun questions.
Okay.
What inspired you to run to be on the board of this multi-million-dollar organisation?
I love my uni. I love the University of Sydney so much. I was that kid in Year 12 that put all their UF preferences, all the 10, in as University of Sydney courses, ranging from engineering to science, to now what I'm doing is completely divergent. But I really wanted to go to the University of Sydney. I love the University of Sydney. The University of Sydney has given so much to me through the student experience, and that was done through the USU. Sure. Saying that, I've also had, some tough times at uni, and I've also had some great times at uni, and I want to make sure that every single student that comes through this university, whether that be a present student or a future student, has the exact same experience and even a better experience than I had. And as a board director, I really, really want to push that and make sure that everyone has the most maximised fun experience at uni.
Great. Sounds great. How long have you been interested in running for the USU, and how long have you held Access membership?
So I have held Access membership for the last 2 years. I didn't have my Access membership in my first year of university simply because I couldn't afford it. But last year, because the way that the colleges and the USU has made a deal that it comes in the college fees, so it made it more accessible for me to have that. But now that Access is a lower price, I would be able to afford Access. So I've been an active Access member the last 2 years. Yeah.
And sorry, the other question was, how long have you been interested in running?
Running for board, I was inspired to run for board after last year's elections. I was thinking about it for a while. During my first year, I kind of knew what it was. I saw the landscape, and I saw, I saw how much the USU elections mattered mostly, and I was quite inspired by that. As I got more active in the university with my Access membership in my second year, I was very inspired to run for board probably after the last election, after Lachlan Finch's election last year.
And so if you had to identify the most important USU program for all students and not just yourself, what program would that be and why? I
think the Clubs and Societies program is the most important for students to get involved in their university. In my first year, I was not involved in the Clubs and Societies program to the extent that I am now, and I regret it a lot. Ever since I got more involved in those programs, I've made my closest friends, had the greatest memories, and I want to make sure that every single student is aware of this program and would love to push this program even more because I've just had the absolute best time, and I want to make sure that they do too.
Sure. A lot of candidates come into this election sort of with stacked resumes of CNS experience.
Yeah.
One of the candidates running against you this year has more than 7 executive positions currently.
It's incredible.
They make the claim that CNS experience is the most important sort of qualification to have for potential USU board candidates. What sort of clubs and societies have you participated in, and do you sort of accept that you're less qualified than other candidates that might have had more CNS experience, that might know how club functions work, or Orion as a system function. Do you have general comment on that?
So I can understand why being an executive in a club and society helps to be a board director that has, wants to improve the clubs and societies service. I completely understand that. I have had the ability to work in the last 2 years closely with clubs and societies execs without being one myself. The reason why I haven't done that is because when I go to an AGM and I go to a club and society meeting, I want to make sure that those positions are elected with the best people for those positions, rather than, like you said before, CV stacking and stuff like that. In the clubs and societies that I've been involved in, including SAS, I've been able to work closely to see how those different mechanisms work, how an event is held, how that kind of stuff happens. If I get elected to the board, I will be eager to learn more about that, and will be eager to work closer with the clubs and societies. I have, in my policies, I do talk about the clubs and societies funding reforms.
Sure.
I made the effort to, despite not being a clubs and societies exec, to go to those meetings and to understand where people are dissatisfied in the current state, in the current landscape of the clubs and societies funding. And I've made that effort to talk to different clubs and societies execs and to really understand where their problems lie. And I think making that effort, despite me not being an executive, really shows that I'm willing to work closely with these clubs and societies and make sure that their experiences optimised. Yep.
In the lead up to every election, candidates tend to reach out to sort of existing support circles they have to sort of quantify the size of their base to see what their prospects might be. Those groups range from clubs and societies to personal friendship networks, colleges and staff. Have you reached out to anyone to seek support currently or before the start of the campaign next week?
I don't like the idea of people using bases as vote leverages. I think that votes should be earned through campaigning and through convincing people that you should be the right choice for them, rather than just trying to use different mechanisms as leverage, kind of who has the most friends situation. I feel like that's, inadvertently that's going to happen in any election, but I haven't reached out to any club and society in particular and say, hey, can you guys help me or anything like that, because I feel like that my vote should be earned rather than try to set things up and convince. Obviously, I've got natural networks like my friends, and people that I've come to know through different clubs and societies. I don't have, like you said before, I'm not the executive of any club and society, so I don't have a solidified base, as people like to say, which I don't like. But I think that all my votes should be earned rather than preset.
Sure. As you probably know, the spending cap this year is $700. How you do you intend to exhaust the spending cap? Will you spend all of the $700?
Probably, yeah. We are given, a cap to do whatever we can to make sure that you have the right resources and have the resources you need for the campaign. We're making sure that we don't obviously go over the spending cap, but we do have some things that will make this election a little bit more fun and enjoyable for the normal student that's walking through, to make sure that everyone gets involved and everyone has the best time in this election, and it's going to be super fun.
Cool. How have you raised the $700? Have you received an election grant of $500 from the USU?
Yes, I have.
How are you raising the remaining $200?
Through my own personal finances.
Your self-finance?
Yes. So through my part-time job.
Sure. Will you be using A-frames or core flutes?
Spicy. Not really. I will be using core flutes with an attached A-frame, yes.
Sure. The core flutes, are they recycled from a previous campaign?
No.
Okay. There's a sizable number of candidates running this year. So I guess if you could distill maybe in 1 or 2 sentences how you're different to the 9 other candidates running.
How I'm different? I guess I am not a massive club and societies name on campus. I've had the opportunity to also be the day student, and I've also had the opportunity to be a college student. I've had both experiences. I've had experience in struggle. I struggled quite a bit in my first year, just finding my feet. So I can see how, not saying that the other candidates have not had struggles, or I'm not sure about their personal circumstances, but in myself, I've had the opportunity to really step back before I got involved. So I didn't get involved in Stu Poll straight away when I got to uni. In my first year, I was just like completely out of it, had the opportunity to observe the landscape from an outsider's point of view, and I've been able to see where things are wrong and where things are really right.
Sure.
And I think that's the, the kind of edge that I have over the other candidates, is that I've had the ability to see that from a different point of view, and maybe from someone who, has struggled to find their feet in their first year at university, and I want to make sure that that struggle is definitely lessened for other people that are coming into this university.
Sure.
So as we said before, there are quite a few candidates running this time. What other candidates do you sort of closely identify or share views with amongst the running other candidates?
If that's going towards political ideologies or something like that, like my policies are they're pretty, neutral, and they're basically policies for the university. So I'm unaware of the other candidates' policies at the moment, it's a bit hard to kind of affiliate myself with the views of any candidate at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Would you, I guess I know it's early stages, but would you preference yourself first and other candidates second, third or fourth when you vote?
Preferencing has been spoken about.
Yeah? Could you go into that?
I will just leave it as in preferencing discussions have been made.
Okay. I guess the flip side of that question is, are there any candidates that you least, which candidates do you least identify with?
I guess, just suspecting from an outside point of view, probably Prudence and Ellie, because just how vocal they've been in the lead up to this about their different opinions about the USU and about the university. So just not in terms of the election policies or anything like that, but just, through the things that they have said leading up to this campaign, different articles and stuff that I've read, probably Prudence and Ellie.
And would that be reflected in how you would rank those candidates in your preferences?
Yes.
Okay. Now, looking at the current union board, what do you think has been its sort of biggest shortcomings?
Definitely transparency. The clubs and societies funding reforms was done very poorly, and I've been very vocal about that. Like I said, I was at the forum before when it got first announced in O Week, and I didn't like how that was conducted and the way that was conducted, done through the holidays. And then, hey guys, we're changing your funding reforms. Have fun in O Week, welcome week, sorry. And it created a lot of outrage, and I could really empathise with, despite not being a club and societies exec, but having, done previous, not uni club and society stuff, how inconvenient that is and how awful that is to, especially the smaller clubs. I feel like the board should have been much more, there should have been a longer period that was announced for, and that they were thinking about making those decisions for. I will be discussing this in my campaign, and it will be based on the proviso of an extended communication period between the board and the clubs and societies, because if, like I said before, I find that clubs and societies bridge the relationship between students, clubs and the USU, and if the USU is coming out making these decisions and angering these people, it's burning that bridge, and it's, you know, stopping people from wanting to get involved and make their own clubs and stuff like that, which I think is really bad. So I think definitely, you know, a bit more accountability and transparency with that.
So I guess leading on from that question, is your main issue with the funding changes, not the funding changes themselves, but the way they were delivered?
I do have a problem with lowering the break-even point for an event. I know that this economic model was created for long-term gain. I do understand that this was created in relation to the access becoming free, now becoming, you know, and to encourage more people to come into the Club and Societies program, to get more people involved, so therefore the break-even point can be higher. But that's not the reality for a lot of clubs and societies at this present time. I know a lot of, you know, smaller clubs and societies that I've spoken to about this, you know, and asked, you know, where you feel like this is going wrong for you, has been through that, you know, break-even point problem. Unfortunately, the USU has come out and stated that they are not changing the economic model. But what I'm hoping to do if I get elected to board is work closely to see where this, if this can be changed at all, it would be great. I don't think they will. Especially if it's modelled on long-term gain. However, what I can do at the moment is focus on communication and accountability towards that, and making sure that major decisions like that this is not repeated in the future, especially in, like, related to any major decisions that's been made by the USU.
Sure. I think we'll talk about your funding policies near the end.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But yeah, I guess sort of, well, looking to the future, what do you envision are like major challenges for the USU board over the next 2 years?
I think as the different things come up on campus that require a politicised response, say such as the Ramsey Centre last year, and, you know, the staff strikes and stuff like that, and the USU, you know, in essence is a student union, and there is that pressure to keep making comments on this where they are not, which is, I feel like, is correct for them not to make comments on those issues. I think that's becoming a more concurrent challenge for the USU to face. And I feel like that's become more frequent, and I feel like that might be a bit of a problem coming up, along with regaining the trust of clubs and societies. And that program, through the changes that they have, that's going to take a lot of, you know, regaining of trust, I think.
Yeah. And I guess, what do you think are the greatest achievements of the current USU board?
I think definitely the way I've just visibly noticed in the difference between, say, my last year and my first year, and the next 2 years is that, like, I think the way that Welcome Week was done this year was excellent. It created more of a festival vibe. I really, really liked that, along with Pride Week and stuff like that creates more of a visibility for the USU, even though there has been backlash around, like, the commercialisation of these events. I feel like that they've done a really good job at making those kind of events more, like, I guess, more festival-like. I think the renovation of Herman's and, you know, trying to improve spaces around campus like Manning and stuff like that has been really successful too, and has been really proactive on that. So yeah.
Awesome. And is there a board director, I guess, past or present, that you particularly admire?
I admire, when I look at the current board, they're definitely role models to me, and like for them to be successful through that election and have made changes that have been really successful so far. I think all of them are pretty inspiring, and I've been pretty vocal about that to a lot of them. So yeah.
It's not fan favourites.
No. I think they work really, really well, and they work really cohesively, and I really admire that, and I really hope that for this election coming up that would be the same with the incoming board. So yeah.
Cool. Let's talk about student interests.
Yeah.
Every candidate more or less says they'll prioritise student interests. Some candidates go the length and say they'll prioritise student interests over politics.
Right.
I guess looking at the history of the union board and looking at the sort of short-term future of it, what do you think has remained unchanged when it comes to student interests historically until now, and what do you think will change in the short-term future?
Ooh. So sorry, could you clarify what you mean by student
So
interests?
what hasn't changed about student interests
Right.
since 1874? What do you think is sort of the constant thing that students are always sort of interested in?
Yeah.
And what do you think has changed about student interests over the last 20 years in the future as well?
I think definitely the visibility of the USU as an entity providing student services has always been, such as like, you know, food outlets and, you know, festivals and stuff like that. Those are things that haven't stopped at any point. And I think changing those events, like I said, with Welcome Week, to keep evolving them, to making sure that they maximise the student experience, I think has been pretty consistent. I think what has changed, like say in the last like 20, were you saying, sorry, growth in the last 20 years?
Yeah, over the last 20.
I think the USU has done a really good job at really professionalising like things such as reviews and, you know, like different showcases to do with the USU and the clubs and societies program. I think they've done a really good job at those. Like I know people that didn't know that reviews were a thing 10 years ago, and now everyone knows what I assume that a lot of people know what a review is, and a lot more people are attending reviews, which I think is really good. So they've done a really good job at that.
Sure. One of the big sort of changes that's happened over the last 10 years is there's an increased number of international students at the university as part of the USU's 2017-20 strategic plan. Accessibility of the union for international students is a big priority. The last time a big policy was introduced to aid international students was in 2017 with Coco Kong, who introduced USU's WeChat platform. Do you have any policies that sort of cater to increased accessibility for international students, or otherwise any other students that have sort of in recent times been coming to the university more than before?
I don't have any policies that are international student directed. Although I'm willing to work with obviously international students and represent international students, I find it very hard to empathise when I'm not in that position. I do understand that, you know, things such as concessions for international students and stuff like that is a problem, and that needs to be looked at. However, I personally don't have any international student specific policies. Rather, my policies are quite broad and will, you know, affect most, if not all, students.
Sure. And just sort of one final question before we talk a little bit about policy areas generally. You've mentioned in quite specific terms that the USU shouldn't really take political stances, that's been a problem for it, that's been a shortcoming. The USU frequently takes political stances in many ways and phased out plastic straws and replaced them at outlets with recyclable straws. That's a political position that prioritises environmental awareness over environmental degradation, that sees students as having a role in that policy fight. When you say that you see the union as sort of not political, that it shouldn't be political, would you be against, for instance, phasing out plastic straws and replacing them?
No, absolutely not. So when I said political issues, I mean controversial political issues that are involving like different political, like say things such as the Ramsay Centre and say, you know, the presence of like life choices on campus. I don't feel like the USU has a place to comment on those. Rather, in terms of larger political issues such as environmentally feasible policies and, you know, trying to, like such as, you know, LGBTQI rights, I think that's really important. And, you know, those things foster a lot of students and resonate with a lot of students, and that's ultimately the goal of the USU, is to try and represent all students. And I feel like, you know, those definitely, I have policies that do reflect things such as that. I do have an environmental policy in my election.
Sure.
And I, you know, definitely think that the USU should be aware and, you know, advocate for those things. But things that come up along the way, such as, you know, very contentious issues, I don't feel like is the place for the USU to comment. Rather, the SRC is more of the activist kind of student organisation, and I would, you know, transfer those kind of stances to them.
Sure. Yeah, just a quick follow-up to that. So you've mentioned same-sex marriage plebiscite as an example of a policy issue that the USU should take a stance on, because you say the majority of students would back, for instance, the yes vote.
Yeah.
Do you think in sort of having an approach to problems that sort of only the majority of students face, you inherently leave out sort of marginalised voices or voices outside of mainstream students, for instance, First Nation students having to come to this university where this building is named after a colonist?
Yeah.
Do you think the USU refusing to take a position on what you call controversial issues are actually issues of great importance to sort of some communities on campus?
Sorry, I just have to think about that one for a sec. So would you be able to repeat the first part of that question?
So the first part was, you just told us
Yeah.
that the USU should take a political stance
Yeah.
when there's majority support for it.
Yeah.
You said, as an example, climate change, environmental
Yeah.
awareness, the same-sex marriage plebiscite.
Yeah.
Those are issues that overwhelmingly students did support. What about the issues that overwhelmingly students don't support? Do you think some of those issues that you've termed controversial are actually of significant importance to some communities on campus?
I think that despite the USU making some decisions in favour of some people, that free speech is still an important part of this campus and is still, you know, allowed on this campus and is still respected on this campus. With the LGBTQI rights on campus, there's still the right for a club or society to just set up a store saying it's okay to say no, and that's something that's not criminalised by the USU. So I think there's still the USU still respects both opinions. In terms of like the Wentworth building and, you know, renaming the Wentworth building, I feel like that has a lot of, you know, historical relevance to the uni, and that's a very contentious decision that would be made through, if I was to know all the aspects of that, you know, decision, and if I was elected to board, would have the ability to go through everything to do with that decision and be probably more informed on that decision, just being honest. I do respect that past USU boards made this, you know, the decision of the Wentworth building, but, you know, as if people are active in, you know, being activists against, say, the existence of the name Wentworth, then the USU should take that and, you know, consider both sides. But it's not limiting the naming of the Wentworth building is not limiting students to be activists against it. It's not like you are not allowed to campaign against the naming of the Wentworth building. You are more free to do that, and I think that's the USU's way of still respecting the interests of all students, is to still allow, you know, free speech to be active on campus.
Sure. We could talk about some of the transparency.
Transparency? Yeah. All right, well, firstly, are you aware of that the union board has a lot of informal processes?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay. And those, like, for example, emails, pre-board meetings, all of that. So there are a lot of ways which the USU can make decisions without the processes behind them being made publicly available.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe this detracts from the board's transparency?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Especially in I keep saying it, but the clubs and societies funding, that's how that was done. And that, I don't feel like should have been, a major decision like that should not have been done like that. That should have been discussed for a long time, or I presume it was discussed for a long time, but it wasn't conducted well. Obviously there's some information that is needed to be protected from students, so obviously, you know, you can't make every single bit of information accessible to students, because that's just done in the protection of students and the protection of staff and the protection of different people, which I respect and I condone. However, major decisions such as the CNS funding reforms, there's certain things that shouldn't be done that way, and that's like as an example of that. I do agree that, you know, emails and, you know, informal decision making, processes do exist and they're active, and that's started in the protection of students and the protection of staff. And some things are not, you know, are done not needing to be in a formal setting, like smaller things. However, major big ticket items such as the CNS funding reform should not have been done through that process, and that process shouldn't be used for those kinds of policies and policy reforms.
Sure. Maybe a question about the student services and amenities fee.
Yeah.
One of the things that sort of encroach upon your statement that you can keep your professional life as a young liberal separate from your campus life is the fact that all board directors are required to campaign against voluntary student unionism, a position that the Liberal Party has supported in the past. If the SAF was hypothetically abolished by a re-elected Scott Morrison Liberal government, and the USU's finances were in dire straits, where would you cut finances and how would you generate new revenue for the union?
In terms of the VSU, the USU does oppose VSU, and I would correspond with my decisions as board director based on the USU and not on my political party. So whatever decision that the USU makes in regards to, say, hypothetically, the abolishment of the SAF and, you know, the reintroduction of VSU or VSU as, you know, whatever the USU decides to do, I will follow for what the USU decides to do. But because the current state of the USU opposes VSU, if I were to be a board director, I would apply my stances on that with the USU.
Cool. Let's talk about case studies then.
Case studies then. All right. Well, in 2016, the USU threatened to deregister the EU, the Evangelical Union, from the CNS program because it had requirements that members had to declare their faith in Jesus Christ. And they said that was sort of a requirement that limited participation. And similarly, in 2018, over 80 USU clubs called on the USU to delay a new policy where it would not fund alcohol at events off campus.
Yeah.
The USU has a track record of running into conflict with clubs and societies.
Yeah.
How would you sort of resolve a situation where there are conflicting interests between the USU and student clubs? Well, for example, within the context of the examples I gave you,
yeah.
and any other ones.
I would conduct negotiations with the club and society execs regarding what can be changed to make sure that both parties have the best interests. I feel like you know, if a club and society was to breach a regulation, obviously the processes will take place, but I feel like there should be a larger negotiation platform between the club and society and the USU to make sure that the optimal, you know, decision is made before rushing into anything that could, you know, upset a lot of students. Especially with the club and alcohol funding reforms, I think that, like the CNS funding, like I keep saying, should have been done in a more negotiated field. I did see after the fact when everyone got G'd up about the CNS funding reform, that's when the forum was made to voice your opinions. That should have been done way before. That should have been done before Welcome Week, before that this was conducted, so the USU can see where students have been, you know, upset and what they're upset about before they go and make those big decisions. Because I feel like to do that later is, like I said, burning those bridges, and that's something that we do not want at all. Rather to work closely with the club and societies and the students to make sure, you know, that their best interests and the USU's best interests, you know, correlate, and that everyone has the most optimal experience.
Cool. The USU is often in a position where it has to consider collaborating with the university on some of the university's goals. It collaborated with the university on remedying issues with student experience by accepting $1 million, which made the funding change possible. Another situation in which the USU is collaborating with the uni this year is the USU has agreed to provide online mediums, communicative channels that it has to the university to assist the university's crackdown on contract cheating. When, if ever, should the USU collaborate with the university? Are there any situations in which you think it would not be valuable for the USU to collaborate?
I think collaboration and liaison with the university is really important. I think that, you know, in a lot of cases, you know, if the university does not do something about a particular issue and the USU, you know, wants to assist, you know, as the USU, you know, aims in essence to represent the students, I think the USU should work with the university and liaison with the university to try and make the best decision possible. In terms of not liaison with the university, I think that, you know, things such as, this is hard. I think the university has, say, you know, shares in, you know, gun productions, and the USU would, you know, can make their own decision based on that and based on what the university does in terms of their internal funding and internal way they generate profit. I don't feel like that needs a discussion. I feel like that's more of a job for the SRC to kind of lobby. So I would say like things such as like internal finances between the university and internal finances between the USU in terms of how they generate their profits should be separate, but in cases such as the Access and the Club and Societies funding reform, if the USU were to, you know, need money or, you know, want to account for a loss, that's in essence the best interest of the students, say for lowering access, and they then needed to correlate with the university, I think that's an issue. That's fine, as long as it's in the best interest of the union and in the students. However, if it was not, then I feel like those two entities should be separate.
Sure. Something that actively offends student interests is when they're exploited for generally or relatively lower financial literacy than might be desired. Right on the heels of the Royal Commission's findings against CBA, USU agreed to partner with CBA and provide one of the most prominent store locations for this year's Welcome Festival.
Right.
In a case where students who live most of their lives off campus, who graduate this university and go on to live in the wider world, given all of that, should the USU pursue some sort of ethical investment drip test to consider, principally speaking, who and what corporations it should partner with?
I don't know enough about that situation to make an informed judgment, just being honest. If I was elected to the board, I'd be able to see all the information and how, you know, people responded to that information, and I think I would be able to make a more of an informed judgment on that if I were to be elected to board in that specific incidence. However, I feel like every decision on the board should be made ethically and, you know, morally, which you would hope to be the forefront of every decision that is made. And I feel like, you know, that should be the role of the interest of any elected board director or, you know, person running to be the elected board director, that things are done morally rather than finances.
On the topic of making ethical decisions, back in 2012, USU VP Tom Rowie leaked confidential documents to Oniswa, which revealed that the university collaborated with police against student strikes. If it's important for ethics to play a role in your decision making, if you found information that was adverse to student interests, would you leak that information to Oniswa?
No. I would not leak that information because information that is withheld from the public is made in the protection of different parties. And I feel like by leaking that information would put a lot of different parties at personal risk. And it's also breaking your regulations, breaking your code of conduct as a board director. And that is something that I don't really aim to do if I was to be elected to be a board director, is to break my code of conduct for the board director. I believe that if the university senior union was to do something so dire that there was a necessity to leak documents, which I wouldn't know if I was to get elected, that should be internally sorted and internally discussed, rather than to irrationally go and leak documents without conversing with the parties that are necessary. I'd rather internal decisions to be made internally rather than externally.
Do you think that detracts from the board's transparency in any way?
No, because after all,
policies.
that the board despite it being a student represented board, it also needs to operate professionally and like a board of a company, and some things inadvertently will have to be withheld.
Awesome. So now we're going to just talk about your policies.
Yeah.
So I know in your policy statement you do mention the colleges a lot.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you want to build a USU for the colleges.
Yeah.
You want access benefits which matter to colleges.
Yeah.
But could you first sort of just go into what you mean by building a USU for the colleges?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to have the experience to go to college, and that, you know, I was also in my first year a travelling student, long hours, so going to college was a necessity for me. But the thing that I found when I got to college was that college students didn't know about what the USU was. They didn't know about what the USU was until I started campaigning for Lachlan Finch, and they said, yeah, you know, I'll vote for him, but not really sure what it's about. That's because the USU doesn't make an effort to correlate with the colleges explicitly, and the college students don't find a reason to get involved with clubs and societies and with, you know, food outlets and stuff like that, because they, you know, can be perceived as a very insular society because we eat at college, all our events are at college. They don't find a necessity to go to the USU, and I don't really. I hate it. I hate it so much. I feel like that college students that get out and, you know, get involved with clubs and societies go on about how rewarding that experience is, but it's them who's going and trying to tell everyone else. And I feel like the USU should take more of a primary role in doing that.
Do you think, I guess leading on from that, do you think college students are distinguished in being a particular group on campus that doesn't engage with the USU compared to sort of the average day travelling student? Like, what makes college students in particular not engage with the USU compared to just your normal travelling student?
I think they are just unaware of the USU and unaware of what it is and what it's about, and there's no active way of like prompting people to do that, and that's what I hope to do if I were to be elected to board.
But would you say that is a problem not just for college students but for just normal?
Yeah,
travelling
no,
students?
absolutely. In my first year, like I said, I wasn't an access member. I got a pamphlet at a week and I was like, that's really expensive, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And there was no one pushing me otherwise to say, no, like this is actually going to be really beneficial for you.
Yeah.
And I want to be that board director that shows people that this is the entity that maximises your student experience, because my student experience without the USU was really boring. I want to make sure that like more people are getting involved with the fantastic programs and the fantastic facilities that the USU has to offer, and I want to really, really, you know, focus on that bridge if I were to be elected to board.
Yeah. But I guess why do college students, if you said that this is not just a problem sort of constrained to college students, but why in your campaign are you focusing on college students in particular about sort of engagement with the USU when it's a problem that all students sort of face?
Yeah, so I went in my policy statement when I said build a USU for the colleges, that is a more specific college targeted policy so that a college student can resonate with. All of my policies hope to engage the everyday student, the travelling student. I put that in there to show that that the wider university community knows about the college students, and you know they feel like they are involved in this kind of, you know, not so much this election but in university organs, especially after how they've come under fire in the last few years.
Sure.
So I put that in, I'm not building my board directorship just for college students, because my policies are quite broad and they will affect all students, and I've done that so, you know, my policies are quite divergent from each other because I want to try and get every single student to resonate with me and trust me as a board director, and not just target a certain person. And by putting that college specific policy in, that's also, you know, showing college students that I do care about them and that I am willing to work with them and try and get involved and maximise their university experience along with everyone else.
Sure. Your policies.
Could I just
Yeah.
just one more question? Talking about concrete examples now.
Yeah.
You say you want access benefits which matter to us, which I imagine is college students.
Yeah.
Could you give an example of an access benefit that would matter to college students?
So
Perhaps more than to
every
local
single
students?
college student pays for access. It's in the fees. It's how it's structured. There's negotiations between the USU and the colleges in conducting how that that fee schedule is set up. Considering every single student pays for access benefits, like no one has it. They don't know what it is. They don't understand what access is despite them paying for it. They just think it's part of their fees and they don't actually understand. In terms of an access benefit for the students, I mean, I think that's probably done through programs rather than like supplying discounts at, Ralph's and stuff like that. It's very like Coke and the Bubblers kind of policy, because like Ralph's is not a USU run, cafe. However, I think, done through programs and things such as like, if every single college student is an access member, then it will target every single college student, but like definitely through programs and like events and stuff like that.
Could you give an example of a particular program or event?
So at the moment, like I said before, we do have the Palladium program, which is a college program that is run by the USU and is facilitated through the USU. It's in pretty dire state at the moment. There's not much engagement with the USU and the college students. The college students only know the whole building because every single Palladium event, Spike Dance, is held there. I would, if I were to be elected as a board director, take more interest in the Palladium program, because that at the moment is the only thing that's engaging college students with the USU. I would reform Palladium, but then also create other events for college students that are in college buildings but are run by the USU.
Sure, cool. Our camera's going to run out in about 3 minutes.
Oh,
so
I'll talk really fast.
Yeah, we'll just do
I'll
two.
prepare my phone just in
Cool.
case.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We'll just 2 quick fire questions on that. But first one, can you maybe talk us through really quickly the Wentworth renovation policy that you have?
Yep, so Wentworth food court at the moment I think is really ugly and gross.
Cool.
I don't think it's really, really nice. With the renovation of Herman's, it only seems natural for the food court to be next. Don't worry, Unibros will still be there, all the outlets will still be there. It'll just look really nice and really probably engage more people into that into that food court.
Sounds great, except for the fact that this policy was championed by Esther Shim in 2016. In 2015, Liberal Minister for Planning Prue Goward approved the university's $1.4 billion redevelopment plan, which includes the demolition of the Wentworth building. Not sure if were you aware of that before?
So I was aware of that. That is something that is not being confirmed by the USU. It hasn't given a timeline of the USU. USU hasn't been given a timeline. That is something that's happening. But at the moment, why was Herman's allowed to be renovated and Wentworth food court to be not? I think temporarily. We don't know how long that's going to take. I would rather maximise, temporarily for the students. I don't think it's a waste of money at all.
Sure. So you would expend money on a renovation of Wentworth food court before its demolition?
Yeah, because Herman's did it. So, yeah.
Okay.